fix your foundation. And we pick this up in Jesus' sermon in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 1. And as we get started, you might remember the Sermon on the Mount is actually Matthew chapter 5, chapter 6, and now chapter 7. And so this is one continual sermon from Jesus. And so he's about 2/3 of the way done. He's got the back third of this message. And here we pick it up in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. And here's what Jesus says to the crowd of thousands of people there on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, up on a hillside, a mountain. He says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others." The standard, if you have a pen with you, circle that word standard in your notes. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. The standard you use in judging will be the standard which you will be judged. And then he goes on and tells this story. He says, "Why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own eye? How can you think of saying to your friend, hey friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye?" And then Jesus says, "You hypocrite. First get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you'll be able to see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." And then in verse 6, he gives us kind of an odd statement. He says, "Don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample on those pearls, and then they will turn and attack you." Now, again, we'll get to that verse in just a second, but let's go back to the first part, that phrase, "do not judge." Have you ever heard anybody use that on you? Hey, don't judge. Don't judge. Jesus said, don't judge, or you're going to be judged. This must be, I think, one of the most misquoted, misused Bible verses in modern culture. If there was a top 5 misquoted Bible verses on TikTok, this would be number 1 each and every week. Why? Because celebrities toss it around when they get called out. Politicians use it to deflect accountability. Even well-meaning people, as we just mentioned, say it as some sort of a moral force field, right? Hey, don't judge me, man. Jesus said so get out of my grill, right? Leave me alone. Our world actually has taken this tiny verse and in a way kind of weaponized it. And not to promote humility and transparency, but to avoid conviction and personal accountability. But let's be clear what Jesus is saying here. Jesus is not saying that there's no place for discernment. There's no place for correction, that you never should offer advice to somebody that maybe they should do something a different way. Jesus is not canceling truth. He's not canceling our responsibility to share biblical values with our world. We're responsible to do that. He's not telling us to stay silent when someone we love is heading off of a cliff based on bad life choices. What he's doing here is calling out the hypocritical spirit of judgment that loves to point fingers at everybody else, but never looks in the mirror, never looks back. And so to really understand what Jesus meant here, we have to go back to the crowd that he was speaking to in the original context. The crowd that he was speaking to there near the Sea of Galilee on the Sermon on the Mount was actually a group of people who were under the spiritual leadership of the scribes and the Pharisees of Jesus' day. These were men who actually, we could say, made an Olympic sport out of judging others. They had all their different guidelines, everything in place. And in the rabbinical teaching of their day, there were actually 2 schools of thought how God would judge or evaluate people. The first was God would use a measure of mercy. That means God's going to weigh your actions with grace and compassion. The second way is God was going to use a measure of judgment, meaning God's going to evaluate you by the strictest possible standards. And there was constant debates about how much mercy or how much judgment God would use upon you as an individual. Truth be told, some of us still do that today. Go ahead and put that back up, guys. Go back to that one. Truth be told, we still do this today, don't we? And we deal with people differently on this scale, don't we? If we like somebody, we go, I'm just going to show them a lot of mercy. If we don't like them, we go, I'm going to just go ahead and share them with a lot of judgment. And this is what Jesus is getting to in this debate. He was referencing this debate when he said the standard you use in judging others is the standard by which you will be judged. So in essence, what he's saying is if you lead with mercy, God's going to meet you with mercy. But if you go around wielding judgment, playing whack-a-mole, right, hitting everybody on the head like a hammer, don't be surprised when that same standard is going to come back around on you. And then to illustrate this, Jesus gives us a story. And to make his point, he gives us an illustration with a bit of humor. He tells the story about a guy walking around with a giant log in his eye, right? Trying to help somebody with a tiny speck in their eyes. And so you could imagine how ridiculous that would look. This is actually a form of ancient comedy from Jesus. The Hebrew humor was to use exaggeration, was to use extremes, kind of like what we use sarcasm today. And the people would have chuckled when Jesus gave this story. But here's the deeper truth in the story. We all walk around with blind spots. We all have areas in our life where we are quick to criticize other people for things that we struggle with in our own lives. By way of example, you could think of a mom and dad yelling at their kids because the kids are yelling, right? You could think of a coworker who's gossiping about others in the office who are gossiping. Or how about this one, a Christian who rants on social media about how bad the world is while they have our own or their own areas of compromise. We do this all the time. And Jesus isn't saying never help your brother out with the speck. He's saying first remove the log from your own eye, and then you will be able to clearly see or clearly help them. You notice what it says. It says first remove, then help. So the order matters. It's not don't ever help. It's start with humility first. That's what Jesus is talking about here. Now in verse 6, Jesus throws, we could say, kind of like a curveball at us. He throws like a slider. He's got this odd statement that says, don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy, and don't throw your pearls to the pigs. So what's he saying here? Well, first of all, this is not an insult. This is actually just wisdom. What Jesus is getting across to us here is that not everyone is ready to receive the truth. There are times when correction will only harden somebody's heart or might escalate a conflict. Has that ever happened to you? You thought you were going to go in a friendly way, and man, it didn't work out. In other words, Jesus is saying don't necessarily force the pearls of truth on someone who isn't ready to value them. So let's take all of this in chapter 7, verses 1 to 6, and let's bring it back to our theme, the theme of building a life that lasts. Here's what we're understanding. You and I can't build something solid when our foundation is cracked with criticism and pride. And what Jesus is teaching us is if you want strong relationships, if you want real influence, if you want a lasting faith, it starts with looking inward at our own life, not looking outward. We could summarize these first 6 verses this way. Deal with your own sin before pointing out somebody else's sin. How about extend the same grace to others that God has extended to you? And how about this one in verse 6? Use discernment to know when correction is wise or when it's going to be wasted. Why? Because the foundation of a lasting life, according to Jesus, is not built on judgment. It's built upon grace, it's built upon humility, and it's built upon honest self-evaluation. So let's do this. Let's get practical. Let's do that. Here's a couple questions we could be asking ourselves right now. Who are you quick to judge right now? Who in your life are you quick to judge this week? Is there someone you've been correcting more than you've been praying for? Or what log in your life have you been ignoring? You see, maybe it's time when we apply this to ourselves, maybe it's time to pause for a moment. Maybe it's time to do some soul searching in our own hearts and ask God to show you, show me, show us what needs to be repaired in our own life. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope this video encouraged you and challenged you. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss what's next. And if you want to go even deeper to this message, part 2 is waiting for you. And all you have to do is click on it because it's coming up right now.